Miss Charlotte Laws. Hello and welcome to the show, Charlotte.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am super excited to talk to you. Let's just dive right in. And so, for my listeners who don't know who you are or what you do, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and the passion behind your work?
Well, with the advocate for victims of revenge porn, I've been working on that for about 10 years. I've worked on other causes in the past, starting with civil rights and gay rights and animal rights. And I write books and do lectures. And yes, I have a lot of passion behind helping causes because that's kind of what gives meaning in life. And I call it other centrism, which is centered around others. And that's what brings personal joy to you as well as helping others. So that's my life's goal. And that's what I try to do.
And for folks who have not seen the Netflix docuseries, can you talk a little bit about what made you passionate about advocating against revenge porn?
Well, it started with my daughter. That's how I learned about revenge porn. So my daughter had taken over 100 pictures in her room, and this was back in January of 2012. And she wanted to save the pictures, and because her phone was full, she sent them to her computer. And one of the pictures was topless, but she had no intention of ever sending that topless picture to anyone. And then she was hacked. And after she got hacked, the topless picture was posted on the most notorious revenge porn website called Is Anyone Up, along with her name, her city, and social media link. And she was at her workplace as a waitress when she found out, and she was just devastated. And she called me, and I knew that we just had to get it down as quickly as possible. And within a day or two, I knew it was a cause as well. Like there were other victims on the site needed to come down. There were no laws that covered this kind of activity as far
Mm.
as, revenge porn. And so I knew I was going to have a lot of work ahead of me to try to put things in place.
Can you talk a little bit for people who may not know what is revenge porn?
It's essentially image based sexual abuse or non consensual pornography. So it's the distribution of nude or topless pictures of ordinary people on the internet, usually.
How old was your daughter at the time?
She was 24.
Mm. And since this incident blew up, because apparently it became national,
Mhm.
how has she been?
She's doing okay now. She originally didn't want to be in the docu-series, but she decided on the very last day to do a half day of filming. And she's really kind of leaning into it now. She really sees the importance of getting the issue out there. And, but before she was, tentative about it because it was devastating for her to go through
Yes.
it over and over again. And
Mm.
she felt that it was hurting her career as a real estate agent. She was afraid that clients would find out and somehow not want to work with her.
Yeah. And, you know, I didn't know about the series before my assistant was telling me about it. I'm going to be honest with you. But I did look at it. Um, and it's just because I don't watch television, I'm not a TV watcher.
Okay.
Um, But one of the things that struck me as I watched the Netflix series, and I won't give it away, but one of the things that struck me was that there seemed to be a period of time before you shared what was happening with your husband.
Yeah, well, my daughter didn't want him to know. She was really embarrassed about the entire thing, and she didn't want me to tell anyone. So she was dating a guy from New Jersey. He didn't find out till years later. I mean, she kept it from him for a very long time. And yeah, she didn't want my husband to know because she was embarrassed about it.
And for me, I'm wondering how that feels as a wife or a partner to keep something so significant from your partner, because by the time he found out or by the time you had shared, it seemed like things were really like escalating. It was just like taking on like this whole other animal. So for you, what did it feel like to not share that with him?
Well, I mean, keeping Kayla's confidence was important. I didn't think that it was necessary to tell him at that time. I kind of wanted to do it more to get his assistance because he was a lawyer. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the reason. It was more of a practical thing that I thought we should tell him, but I was going to honor her request. And so I didn't feel bad about holding that information back from him. And
Okay.
then I did tell him, the first time I told him, we told him at the dinner table, and he just started laughing and said, "Oh, that's no
Oh
big deal.
man.
It'll go away if you ignore it." And my daughter just burst into tears and ran to her room, saying, "I knew we shouldn't have told him." So he doesn't really understand the internet, and he couldn't understand why it was such a big deal.
What were your thoughts at that reaction?
The what?
What were your thoughts at his reaction?
Oh, well, I just thought that, obviously he was wrong, and, he doesn't go
Yeah,
online much, so he doesn't really understand. And my feeling was too, is that if this had happened to him, I think he would have been horrified. So,
absolutely.
I just think he wasn't really thinking at that moment, perhaps.
Yeah. As you were kind of going down this rabbit hole and trying to, I think what you were doing at one point was you were just trying to get your daughter's pictures removed. But then you went down this rabbit hole and you saw all of these people, including friends of hers, that were also in this position as well. So, what were you thinking as you continued to discover more and more about what this website was about and how many people were compromised?
Yeah, I mean, it was a website about hatred. It was not about nudity. It was not about pornography. It was about bullying. It was about ruining lives, trying to get people fired, trying to drive people to suicide. The group called
Mm,
themselves the family. So it was like a cult, like a Charles Manson type of language they used.
mm,
And the owner of the site called himself the father, and the followers were the children. And sometimes the children would say things like, "I will kill for you, Father. What do you want me to do?" So it was very cult like, and really a despicable place, and horrible comments made about many of the nude pictures, calling people fat, a whale, ugly, picking apart their bodies. So, but yeah, my daughter saw one of her friends on the site and found out that she had been hacked, just like my daughter had been hacked. And that's why I thought to myself, it's pretty bizarre that I only know two people on this site and both have been hacked. So I assumed there was probably a hacking scheme. And that's what prompted me to do an investigation of the site. I used to be a private investigator back in the
oh,
1980s. So I basically picked about 40 victims who had been posted within a 2 week period of my daughter. And I started contacting them to find out how they were on the site. And I found out that 40% of the 40 said they had been hacked. And we knew it was the same hacker in some cases because the hacker was leaving behind an email address that was the same. So that really helped me when I got the FBI involved. I was able to give them this 12-inch file of all these victims and all this information about the website, and hopefully that helped their investigation.
can you count how many doors were closed in your face before someone took you seriously?
There were a lot. I mean, I started with trying to call attorneys. I did call
Yeah.
9 attorneys, but they didn't know anything about this issue.
Mm-hmm.
It was a brand new issue. And I tried calling the website owner's advertisers. I called his publicist, his attorney. I even tried to call his mother, thinking, well, she could perhaps do something.
Mm-hmm.
And I found her former workplace, but she no longer worked there. So there were lots of phone calls, lots of emails, lots of communication trying to get assistance, and it was really an uphill battle. And then in the meantime, society was doing all the victim blaming because this was prior to the Me Too movement.
Yes.
So as I started to discuss the issue with friends and other people, as time went on, people were saying to me, "Oh, well, who cares about the victim? It's their fault if they have that picture on the site, and that would never happen to me." And as I started meeting with politicians, they were like, "I'm not ever going to support a law on this." I mean, it was a lot of negativity, and the media were glorifying the website owner,
I saw that.
getting these headlines and big pictures and the cover of Rolling Stone, and he was like, they were making him into a big shot and this cool guy that had this unique business model. So it was really tough.
Yeah, and it sounds like they were making him into the guy. I can't remember his name. The Girls Gone Wild guy.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, very similar to that sort of thing. He was being very glamorized. I think he was, referring to himself as like he wants to be the white puff daddy is what he described himself, which I thought that's such an ironic, such a bizarre statement in and of itself. But I'm also curious it, as you were kind of going down this and looking at this, what was your motivation to continue like pushing through despite all of these no's, despite all of this victim blaming, despite all of these doors being shut in your face? What propelled you to keep going forward and fighting this thing?
well, I mean, as I said, I felt that it was a cause within a day or two. And so I realized that, these other victims needed to be protected, the site needed to come down, that laws needed to be put in place. And I've just always been a cause oriented person since I was a kid in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, being raised in Atlanta, Georgia. I was, fighting against the upper class community who were really very, very racist. And my adopted family was very racist. And so I was called an N lover like practically every day by people who were supposed to be my friends or schoolmates. So, I was always kind of fighting for causes and for fighting against prejudice has always been important to me. And, prejudice, this is sexism, is really what revenge porn is because it's mostly targeted at females.
Yeah, yeah. But I would imagine this cause became very dangerous for you also, right? Because it was a point at where you were wondering about the safety of yourself and your family.
Right. Yeah, because Hunter Moore had these followers. And so I became like the number one enemy of them because I was going after Hunter Moore essentially or trying to get the site down. So I was getting death threats, I was getting computer viruses, and there was even a stalker who came to our house, which was left out of the docuseries. So it was really quite scary. And we got locks for the gates, and I put metal rods under the beds. We didn't know what to expect. Just, have all these anonymous people coming after you who have no idea if they have anger issues, if they have guns, if they just
Absolutely.
get out of prison. You don't know who they are, so it's
Absolutely.
very scary.
Was there a point in time when your family said, you know what, it's not worth it anymore?
Oh yeah, my daughter and my husband both wanted me to stop. After my daughter's picture came down, they both wanted me to stop. But of course, all these other victims are still up there, and many of them I had talked to on the phone. I mean, I was, and I felt like a suicide hotline because I was a lot of times, I'd say 50% of the time, I was the first one to tell them they were on the site, and so because their picture a lot of times had just come up and they were just hysterical and they didn't want to tell their family or their friends. I mean, they were embarrassed, just like my daughter had been. And so I was somebody who could at least give them some assistance. I had some experience with the issue, so I was someone they could talk to. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not going to turn my back on all these other people. And so I knew I had to get their pictures down, and I knew that getting the site down was really important as well.
Outside of your daughter, was there any one person that maybe stood out to you or that you were more concerned about over some of the others?
Well, there were cases that were, really troubling. There was one victim who was from Iran, and her father wanted her to go back to Iran to visit relatives. And in the Middle East, if you have a topless picture online, you can be killed. You can be arrested by the authorities and killed. And so she was hysterical. She was so freaked out about having to get the picture down and trying to make excuses to her father as to why she couldn't go back there. So and then there was, I remember the Kansas teacher. Just that story always makes me emotional. But
Yes.
there was a teacher that Hunter said that should I post the teacher? So all of his followers said yeah, yeah, yeah. So then, bam, her pictures go online along with the name of the school where she works and other personal details. So the followers start sending the new pictures to the school board and the parents, anybody they could find associated with that school, saying, fire that slut and you have a whore teaching your children. And so I called the school the next morning and left a message for her to call me. And she had been in her classroom And the principal walked in and said, "Get your things together and go home." And she said, "Why?" He said, "Get your things together and go home." So she gets her stuff, she walks out the front, she passes the receptionist, they give her my message to call me. She walks into the parking lot, and that's when she calls me and finds out she's on the website. And she's just in tears, just feels completely
Mm.
devastated. And so that story always sticks with me a lot.
Yeah. And what is it about that story that sticks with you the most?
I guess, one reason is because I followed it from beginning to end. I knew before her pictures came up, and I knew all the way to when she had to go face to face in front of the school board and try to keep her job. So, and it was just from beginning to end. I talked to her mother at one point because her mother ended up finding out about it. And so it was, I just feel like I kind of knew the whole thing.
Yeah, you got to see the whole journey, and so that was much more powerful. And I'm curious, what did you do to sustain or maintain your own emotional or mental well-being while working with people around this?
Well, I mean, it was hard because I had to talk to so many people who were devastated. So it was draining. And it
Mm-hmm.
was also hard because the website was so negative that I was immersed in this negativity all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to be on that website because I had to see everything that was going on. I had to be on his Twitter page where he had, I believe, 600,000 followers. I had to see everything he was doing in order to properly investigate and be able to get the upper hand because he was very obsessive about his website and about Twitter. He was always on there. I have no idea when he slept, to be honest. And so, yeah, it was hard and I was working, doing this like all day, every day. I put all my job, everything to the side, and I was just like nonstop obsessed with trying to get my daughter's picture down, getting other pictures down, getting the site down. So, yeah, it was draining for sure.
Yeah. And what was the feedback from your family with the amount of time that you were kind of immersed in, dedicated into getting this stuff removed?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, they didn't really want me doing it. So, it was obviously, it had become, I was preoccupied with it. And that's why I think why my husband, we were getting the direct death threats, but he also just was really fed up with all the time and energy I was putting into it
Yeah.
that he decided he would help and talk to Hunter Moore's attorney. And I had talked to him a couple of times, the attorney, but he never really took me seriously. But since my husband was an attorney, he took my husband seriously. And so her picture came down at that point.
Wow. How many hours
I
you spent before it finally came down? Do you?
really don't know. I don't know. But I know
Um,
I was nonstop. And as I said, I put everything to the side, and this is all I was doing. So
um,
it was definitely a more than a full time job, working
it
on it.
sounds like it, and it sounds like you even spent a great deal of time even after that, just
Right.
advocating for other people. What surprised you the most about working on this?
How stubborn the website owner was. I mean, I just couldn't believe that. See, like at one point before my husband got the picture down, I actually got in touch with the president of Black Lotus Communications, and they did the cybersecurity for the website. And I talked to the president, and I was able to convince him to help me. And he blocked my daughter's page. And so it disappeared for, I don't know, an hour or two. Hunter built an entire new page for her because he was just so determined to keep her picture up. And I just was really amazed that he would go to that kind of trouble to be that nefarious and that mean spirited. And I was very surprised that he was so determined to do that.
Definitely very narcissistic for sure, but I'm also curious on what your thoughts were about the people that really like supported him. I mean, from what you're describing and from what the docuseries shows, it sounds like he had a lot of backing behind him with people that just really supported what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a game. It was like a hobby, um, attacking mostly females. There were some males on there too who wanted to be off that site.
Mhm.
We had victims in our group who were males.
Absolutely.
but it was just misogynistic. It was it was people being as mean as they could, and the anonymity of the internet kind of, I think, makes people feel like they can be meaner and spew hatred a lot more. And it's
Yeah.
very sad because that's not the path to happiness for themselves or anyone else. And it surprises me that people would enjoy doing that kind of thing.
It is, and it was, very cavalier about the sense of destruction that it caused in these people's lives. It's the sense that I also got, like people were, gloating or promoting the destruction of a person's life and therefore their livelihood
Mm-hmm.
around that by posting these pictures. And it was very interesting to even watch, I think it was even newscasters on the docu-series that were very just dismissive and victim blaming, and it was like, well, they shouldn't have been so stupid and posted that.
Mm-hmm.
um, but working with narcissists and victims of narcissists, people are prey to this all the time, even just in intimate relationships where their partners want to get even or coerce them into staying into the relationship by posting their photos. So it's very interesting just to watch, like, and scary almost to watch, like, society get on board with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was we were like we were the bad guys for a very long time.
Yeah.
Hunter Moore was the good guy according to the press, the politicians, regular people, and then law enforcement didn't want to get involved,
Yes.
largely because they're used to brick and mortar crimes. They're
Yes.
not used to the cyber stuff, and it's hard to do the cyber stuff
Yeah.
because it could be from anywhere and it's complicated. So yeah, so we just had a lot of pushback.
And even now, like even now in the end of 2022, almost 2023, there's still not a whole lot of legal policy around it. I mean, there's some stuff, but it's still not a whole lot of protection per se.
Yeah, there really isn't because we have
Yeah.
state laws in 48 states, but many of them are misdemeanor.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't even investigate electronics when it's a misdemeanor. You can't get a subpoena. And it's like in California, it's like $500 fine and 6 months in prison for your first offense. I mean, it is a slap on the wrist. And laws are important because one thing I found out about the perpetrators who distribute revenge porn is they're very afraid of law enforcement. They do
Mm-hmm.
not want to go to prison. They're not afraid of civil suits because they don't tend to have assets. They tend to live at home with their parents, and
Mm-hmm.
they just don't care if they get sued civilly. And so the laws are important, and we've had a lot of trouble getting a federal law passed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we have the Protect Act, which is kind of fading away now, and that's something that Jackie Spear had brought forward a while back. And now we have a new law. Actually, the Shield Act. That was the Shield Act, and the Protect Act is the new law that's being brought forth by a senator from Utah, and Mike Lee. And that one is kind of mirrors what the porn industry had to do for a long time. They had to do this indexing. So in other words, they had to have on file a driver's license for the porn stars, and they had to have a consent form. And so that's pretty much what the Protect Act says, is that they need to have that on file. And the porn industry had to comply with this for about 30 years until 2018, when they pretty much went to court and said, why do we have to do this when revenge porn is just doing whatever they want?
Yeah.
It just wasn't really fair. And they've always been very upset about revenge porn, the porn industry, because it gives them a bad name. It takes away some of their profits. And, they're having to have this bookkeeping rule that they had to adhere to, and revenge porn is just doing whatever they want and getting away with that.
So with revenge porn, you're saying that the person who posts the photos, according to this act, has to have their driver's license on file in some sort of consent form from the person whose picture it is that they post.
Well, the website has to have that on record. So the website is not allowed to have the content on their website unless they actually have that on file. And if something comes up and they don't have that, if a picture comes up and they don't have that information, they have 72 hours to remove it. And the 72 hours is really quite similar to the Digital Millennium Copyright period of time. Because if you take a picture of yourself, for example, you own the copyright
Yes.
automatically. And you can send a notice to the website and say, that's my
Yeah.
copyright,
Take
please
it
remove
down.
the photo. The
Yes.
problem is with revenge porn, a lot of these website owners they refuse to comply with copyright law. And so they're supposed to remove it within 72 hours, but they often don't do it. So that's what Hunter Moore did. We said the first thing I did is send him a notice to
Yeah.
take down that picture, and he wouldn't do it. So yeah, so that's
Wow.
not strong enough law to get people to do anything because it's usually a civil case.
Yes.
And if someone has money and you sue someone who did this to you and they have money, you can get $250,000 per photo, which is pretty much a lot of money. But if the perpetrator has no money, they don't care if you sue them,
Yeah.
and you're just going to like spend your own money getting an attorney and
Mm-hmm.
going through, feeling victimized all over again.
Yeah, and I also think, in California, it takes a lot for people to even go after someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like your face has to be present, you have to be identifiable in the photos. I can't speak for other states, but just knowing, some of the policies in California, they're very specific before law enforcement or anyone will even look at the photos.
Right. And it's supposed to cause you extreme emotional distress, and you have to
Correct.
somehow prove that. I don't
Correct. Yeah, you do. And so it's very interesting. So even though we have those policies in place, it seems rather challenging to do anything about it. Do you have any recommendations for people that find themselves in that predicament where someone has posted a photo or video of them without their consent?
Well, we have a hotline at the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, and it's cybercivilrights.org. And so they have a 24-hour hotline, and they have a lot of information posted on their website. And if you do need an attorney, the Cyber Civil Rights Legal Project will help people pro bono. And you can do a search in Google to find out, how to get in touch with one of those attorneys. And they're in most of the states, I think. So those are two tools. But I mean, there are other things you can do as well, such as obviously keep screenshots of everything so that
Yeah.
you have that as evidence. You can copyright your photos. If you didn't take the picture and say your female friend took the picture, you can ask her to sign over the copyright to you so that you own it, and you can register it in Washington D.C. I think it's about $36, and you can do thousands of pictures
Yeah.
for $36. And there are lots of other little things. If you're in a relationship, you can do a social media prenup, or if you're already in the relationship, you can do a post-nup, something where it says you can't do this type of thing and what kind of behavior is acceptable or is not acceptable in the relationship with regards to social media. So, there are various tools and ideas for what you can do if you have been victimized or don't want to get victimized.
What if there's someone who's listening to you, right? And they have been victimized, but they're in a place where they're very ashamed and they don't want anybody to know, and they're afraid to move any which way because they don't want it to blow up. They don't want people to find out. There's a lot of shame and embarrassment. What do you say to a person like that?
Well, I say that it isn't their fault. I say that they have a right to take pictures of themselves if they want to. They certainly shouldn't feel bad about it. The hotline, they can always talk to somebody on the hotline. I've talked to over 500 people in the last 10 years, and I still get calls from
Wow.
victims. So, you can find somebody to talk to you about it. And I also say that if you're worried about the pictures showing up online, you should build up your presence on the internet. You don't want to shut things down because the initial reaction is shut everything down. But
Mm-hmm.
no, you want to build up all the positive stuff because that'll push the pictures further down on Google and less chance that anybody will find them. So it's kind of the opposite, avenue to what your initial reaction is.
Yeah. Can you take me back to when your daughter first told you about the pictures? As a mom, what was your first thought?
Well, I mean, I hated that she was in so much pain, and I totally could empathize, and I knew that we had to get it down, and I could tell that she really wasn't, she wasn't really going to be able to do it herself. She was too upset, and by the time she came home, she locked herself in her room, and she did shut down her social media presence. She was getting contacted by strange
I
guys,
saw that.
and one guy, even a well-known guy in the porn industry, even contacted her to quote talk business, is what he said. And she hung up on him. So yeah, it was really, and all of her friends were finding out, and everybody at the restaurant knew where she worked. And the assistant manager said to her, "I could get you fired." And she lost an acting part over it, like a week later. So 'cause she was trying to become an actress. So yeah, it was really affecting her life in big ways, emotionally and you know, physically.
Yeah. Was there ever a point where you were really worried for her emotionally, like how she was going to get through it or if she was going to be able to get through it?
I didn't feel that way about. I felt like she was going to get through it. I mean, she lived at home with me at the time, so
Mm-hmm.
she was just in the next room over, and so she had the support system at home. And there were other victims I was more worried about who were really closer to suicide, and about 50% of revenge porn victims contemplate suicide.
Mm-hmm.
93% suffer severe emotional distress, according to the study that I know of. So there were other people who were suicidal, and I don't think my daughter was ever suicidal. She just was really, devastated by it. But I thought she would get through it.
When victims are suicidal, what do you think is the number one reason that they become suicidal over the photos? Do you feel like it's just because the photos are simply out there? Or are they ashamed that their family is going to find out? Or is it because um, there's already been some sort of repercussions behind it that are pretty significant? What do you feel like those major contributors are? Or are they just very.
I think it's buried. I don't think it's usually that there's already been something that's happened.
Okay.
I don't think that. But I think the thing about the internet is it's forever. And so people feel they can't escape from it. And so there were two girls who actually did kill themselves, not because of this
Um,
website, but because of revenge porn. And one of them was named Audrey Pott, and the other was named Retta Carson.
yes.
And I talked to both of their parents, at some point, like a year later after all this was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And both parents said the same thing. Their daughter had been raped by multiple men. And then, it was over. It was horrible. It was terrible. It was devastating. But they were going on with their lives until the pictures surfaced. And that's when they killed themselves. And the parents said to me, for my daughter, revenge porn was worse than rape. And that's because, being raped is horrible, 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 but you can compartmentalize it. You can try to not remember it. You can
Yeah.
never tell anybody about it. You can keep it secret, which a lot of women have done. I mean, the Me Too movement brought some people out of the closet who were like keeping this information, inside and not wanting to tell anyone. And but revenge porn, it's like you can keep going to different cities and it follows you everywhere and everybody knows and you just can't escape it. So people feel like their life is over. They feel like there's nothing I can do. That's the end of it for me.
Yeah. Mm. Even now, as you sort of talk about it, is there a point in where it actually becomes too much?
Too much for what do you
Just
mean?
like, do you ever just become so overwhelmed and it becomes too much for you?
It's well, time wise, it can be because and now I'm actually getting calls from people not even just related to this issue, but people saying, "Hey, can you help me? My grandmother disappeared 2 years ago. Can you help me find her?" I mean, I'm getting calls like, "Oh, I need to get my children back. My husband,"
Yeah.
so I'm getting calls not related to the issue. So
Yeah.
it takes a lot of time to talk to these various individuals and give my advice, whatever advice I might have to give them. But emotionally, I would say no. I would say that it's fine. I feel, very much in control of the whole situation, and I'm really just kind of trying to lobby legislators to get a federal law in place.
And you talk to us about that process because I think that's important to hear about what goes into that and how you've been received.
Yeah, we initially were received very poorly. When I first started out, California was the first state to have a full-on anti-revenge porn law,
Mm-hmm.
and Anthony Cannella is a state was a state senator who brought forth the law. And so I helped him with the bill, and I went up and spoke in front of the legislature in Sacramento. And, it's uphill battle. I mean, people were not really, the politicians were not really interested in assisting us. I think one big reason, well, the ACLU has always been against revenge porn laws. So they were our main adversary. The second issue in California is we have something called realignment, which simply means that the legislature feels there are too many people in prison and they don't want any more felonies because they don't want people to go to prison.
Correct.
So that was another barrier. And frankly, I think that because we're so many Democrats in Sacramento, and that's who I was mainly speaking with. I think because it was the ACLU, they kind of wanted to make the ACLU happy. And so the Republicans were much more sympathetic. They were on our side initially, and the Democrats weren't, which was kind of weird because you would think the Democrats would want to support women, but that was not the experience. And now it's very much 50-50. I mean, it doesn't matter what party you're in. Many, many people do support putting some law in place. But again, the ACLU is fighting us. There are also some people in the progressive side of the Democratic Party who are fighting it also because same thing as realignment. They don't want more people in prison. They want to let people out and, like the defund the police and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So they're fighting against this as well. And so those are kind of the main obstacles, I would say. But, there are a lot of people signed on to it from both parties, and I'd say it's very equal. But there are obviously certain legislators who are not supporting it because if they were, it would have already passed. Because Jackie Spear brought forth a law 3 times and could not get it passed. Yeah.
Well, ultimately, what would the ideal goal be with this for you?
I mean, I would like to see a federal law, and I'd like it to be, it doesn't have to be a felony. It can be a wobbler. I've always been like, if the states had a wobbler, which means a judge can decide if it's a felony or a misdemeanor. But we have about half the states who have laws have a misdemeanor. So it's really very much a slap on the wrist. So I think a federal law is very important to feel like everybody is protected. And also when you're going from one state to another, you don't want to wonder which law pertains. If the one state and you're in another, you don't even know, is it my law? Is it his law? You don't know what's going on. So I think for consistency's sake and to make sure everyone's protected, I think we need something solid and strong. And I think it will curtail the revenge porn because, as I said, perps just don't want to go to jail. That's what I find.
Absolutely. The other question I have for you is, since you were fighting this one guy and this one website, and that seems to have been some successful, do you feel like the cases of revenge porn are slowing down, or are they ramping up? Like people who are having this done to them, do you feel like that's slowing down at all?
I don't think it is slowing down because during the pandemic, I heard statistic wise that actually things were on the increase. And I think because people were at home and they were on the internet more, perhaps, I don't know. But the most prominent sites that were in the United States have shut down. So we don't have a lot of really prominent sites like we did before. But I do think around the world there are quite a few. And there are some still in the United States, and it's still happening here. And so I definitely think, and it's other countries. Some countries have laws too, where it has been passed in various places. So we're not the only country looking at the issue.
Very scary. Your daughter's computer was hacked. Did you find out more about her computer being hacked and how easy that was for her pictures to have been taken?
Yeah, at the time, it was the hacker was somebody that the website owner paid to hack pictures, and so what he was doing it through Facebook, and he started with his own Facebook friends, and he would hack into them, and then he would hack into their friends, and then friends of friends, and friends of so he was branching out through Facebook, and once he got into somebody's Facebook account, he would take over their email. And he was using this kind of social engineering thing where he would claim he lost his password and then he had to have a new password sent. And then he would contact the victim, the person he's about to victimize, and pretend he was one of their friends and say, hey, can you give me the code? they're going to send you the code because I lost my password, whatever. And
Yeah.
so it's harder to do it now because the
Yeah.
social media companies have toughened things up for two-factor authentication, et cetera. But back then, it was pretty easy to do
Yeah.
and get the information. And so the hacker actually lived. Well, he actually went to high school about a block from where Kayla was raised, to the house that she was raised in, and they had 6 friends in common on Facebook. So, as I said, it's because he's from our community and he was going to his friends, and he actually posted some of his friends nude, which they were just
Wow.
horrified to find out that he would do that to them because they thought they were friends. And so he was, as I said, just whoever's account he could get into, he would rifle through it. He would look for nude pictures. If he found them, they would go to Hunter Moore and he would get paid for it.
Was there a particular system? Like, was he looking for someone in particular, even within his friend group, like to post, or was he just sort of being very savage and taking whatever he can get?
Yeah, I think it was very random. It's just whoever's account he could get into, he would go to
Yeah.
the pictures. That was it.
When you talk to these women and men, do you notice differences between the victims, in terms of what they're reporting to you or how they're sort of dealing with the situation?
You mean between the two sexes?
Yeah.
Not really. I just think that I mean, I would say that society comes down harder on females, and so I think females kind of take it to heart more, blame themselves more. Put the knife inward. I think that I think in some respects, because of the societal attitudes, females feel worse about it. But the men were pretty frantic as well, that I
Mm.
know of. And one of them, for example, had just graduated law school and he was out trying to get a job in a law firm. And he's like, this
Mm.
picture was like right front and center on the internet. And he was very afraid that his future employers were going to find the picture. And so yeah, I think that males, I guess it's societally just a little more acceptable, and that's why maybe it's a little, for most males, it may not be as traumatic, but, it's still very traumatic for the person. I think it depends more person to person than anything.
Absolutely. And one of the questions I have for you, and I don't know how much you stay up on hacking anymore as these people talk to you, right? If their photos are sort of hacked from them. Um, but if you do, I'm curious if you've noticed some different hacking trends to getting photos now versus back then.
I really don't know. I'm not that well versed on hacking. I do know that when all this was happening, I had a computer repairman come to my house a couple of times to be getting the viruses off my computers, and he said to me that to beware of any unusual cars or vans on the street because he said that unless a hacker is really sophisticated, they need to be near your house if they want to get into your network. And so it wasn't too long after that when Kayla first saw somebody sitting on the street in this white car. And I had never told her what he had said, so I couldn't say, oh, you're just paranoid. You just. And then this guy was back the next night. And I was fed up at this point. I mean, this was kind of further into the story. And I marched out to the car, and Kayla was running behind me, going, Mom, what are you going to do? Mom, what are you going to do? And I said to this guy, he was like a 20 to 30-year-old blonde, curly haired kid who's looking at something in his lap. And I said, May I help you? And he just looked at me, freaked out, zoomed away, almost hit my neighbor's wall. And so I feel like he was definitely guilty because otherwise he would have said, oh, I'm just waiting for your neighbor. He would have like freaked
Yeah.
out and zoomed away. So anyway, and there was a guy in the courthouse too, because we went to the arraignment and the trial and all this. There was a guy in the courthouse that was sitting with Hunter Moore who looked a little bit like that guy. So it could have been the same person. I wasn't
Interesting.
sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I hear that there's ways that people can do things through Bluetooth and all this other kind of savvy stuff. Um,
But also Anonymous came to our aid, and Anonymous knows all about hacking. The underground group Anonymous.
okay. Can you say
Yeah,
more about them?
yeah. So what had happened was at one point, Hunter had sold the domain to his website, so the website came down, and then he went out publicly and said, I'm bringing the site back. I'm just putting it on a new domain." And everybody was freaked out about this. Not only he said he was going to bring back the same pictures, but he was going to put addresses for the victims with driving directions on how to get to their houses. And so that's when I made his home address public on Twitter, because a lot of people have been calling me asking for the address to serve legal papers anyway. I've been doing that for quite a while. So of course I got huge amount of backlash from his followers over that, over posting his address, and he actually made some threats against me. And then the group Anonymous, the underground white hats, they came to my rescue and they contacted me and said, "Don't worry, we're going to protect you." And they went after Hunter the next day and they doxed him. They put all of his personal information online. They sent him like 200 dildos. They got him officially declared dead in the state of California for a month. They did all this like kind of hilarious stuff, actually. And he was very quiet after that because he was extremely scared of Anonymous. And he was like, "Okay, I'm not going to say anything anymore." So yeah, he was. And then eventually the FBI arrested him, and he ended up going to jail, but not for very long.
What's what do you think about him now?
Well, I feel sad that he hasn't changed his mindset. I have, he's done a couple of very small interviews on podcasts, just with like people that kind of like friendly to him, very friendly type of interviews. And he says he's not remorseful. He said he would only do, the only thing different that he would do is jack it up 10 times harder. He blames everyone except himself. He blames his attorney. He blames the hacker. He probably blames me. And he just, he has this belief that if you tear other people down, somehow it builds you up. And that's always been his belief. And it's just surprising to me that he hasn't grown up. I mean, he's 36 years old now. You would think he would like say, "Wait a minute, what I did was really not cool. I need to change my life. I need to get a new path." And because he actually can get all these followers, I call him a charismatic leader. He is kind of like Charles Manson. He's able to draw people to him. And so you can do positive things as a charismatic leader. You can, get people to do great things for society instead of bullying people and hurting others. So I think it's very sad, and I don't understand why he hasn't changed his mindset.
Is there a part of you that's still, that may be worried about what he could potentially do or is afraid of it?
No, I'm really not. I feel like he didn't, even though his prison experience was very minimal, I still think he thought it was a bad experience. And I don't think he wants to go to jail again. So I think he's going to try to stay out of jail. He is on some social media sites. I haven't been over to check, but people tell me that he's making racist comments and sexist comments and anti-gay comments, and there's just a lot of really mean stuff going on. And so he's doing that, but I don't know of anything illegal that he's doing. And I just don't really think about him anymore. I don't really want to have anything to do with him in the future because I think he's negative energy.
Mm. Over the long haul, how's your family doing as it relates to this now? Like, do you guys still talk about it? Like, what happened to your daughter back then, or just the emotional turmoil it took on the family? How is your family doing as it relates to this now?
We're doing fine. My daughter, as I said earlier, is really
Yeah.
kind of gone around the corner as far as feeling more accepting of it and being willing to be out there about it. And she got married about 3 months ago, so that's
Good
very
for her.
exciting. And she's doing very well. And so we don't really discuss, her situation anymore because
Right.
it's been 10 years. But I do counsel other victims, so obviously I'm still discussing the issue a lot. And I talk to politicians when asked so that I can try to influence them to support federal legislation.
Uh-huh.
And I recently spoke to the two states that don't have laws, which is Massachusetts and South Carolina. And the legislator in Massachusetts told me that he thinks that his bill will pass by the end of the year. So hopefully it will. And South Carolina, it did not pass. And the state senator, I spoke to his office actually, and they said that they don't know if there are any plans to bring it forward again. So South Carolina will not have a law in the foreseeable future.
And I think, and I appreciate you talking about that because I think people should be really worried about that, about the laws
About
and the laws and
Oh yeah, and
policies.
I think that,
It, yeah, I don't know
yeah,
that
I mean,
people grasp the magnitude of how huge what you're saying is. That there is literally not a lot of protection for you. Your life or your livelihood could literally, someone could take that and all the world could see it, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. That's
mhm.
huge.
It is huge, and that's why people need to contact their legislators. I don't think
Yeah.
they realize the impact that one phone call or one email has, because very few people do that. So when you do it, it's like makes a big impact on that particular politician,
Yeah.
and so you can actually move them to, do certain things.
Yeah, and it's I think you're right. I think advocacy is better when it comes in numbers. So,
Hmm.
we're almost at the end. Tell us what we should do, how we can support you, if you have anything else you're working on that we can support you with.
Well, I mean, you can simply call your legislator about the Protect Act and say that you do want a federal law, and that's probably the best thing you can do. I think there's some petitions online to support that particular legislation, so you can also do that. And if someone wants to donate money, they can give money to the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, who has the hotline. And follow me on Twitter, Charlotte Laws, for updates.
Okay, and can people write to you or contact you specifically, or do you want them to contact you through the Cyber Rights Initiative?
No, I'm not even, I have nothing to do with that
Okay,
organization.
okay,
I used to be on the board a long time ago, but I have nothing to do with them. So
okay.
yeah, they can just contact me through social media, either through Twitter, which is at Charlotte Laws, or Instagram, which is at Dr. Charlotte Laws, or if they find me on
Yeah.
Facebook, they can also, I am on Facebook, but I don't, you can find me on there too.
Right,
I don't know what I am,
right.
but I'm on there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. For coming on and speaking about this, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing such great work in advocacy and awareness and bringing this to people's attention, because this issue that you're talking about is very significant, and it's very real, and it's very scary to know that these things could happen and there's not a lot we could do, or you have to go through hell and high
Mhm.
water for anyone to even listen to you or to file charges or to do these things. I think that's very significant, and that definitely needs to change.
Right, I agree.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much. Yes, you are quite welcome.